Unmute. Am I there?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Oh, how about, oh, there I am.
And now we can see you.
Well, you know, I tuned in when this whole thing was starting out, and I sort of got an introduction to a lot of the folks that were involved. But as I've tuned in over the time, you all have progressed and moved along so far from the excitement of the beginning of, you know, we're going to do this, and this is what we're going to do. It's so great to see the progression of everybody's interest and contributions and getting a lot out of it. And it just kind of reminds me of the days of doing the Kerrville Folk Festival, when these types of workshops would take place, and you'd see the growth over a few days of people, and different techniques we'd use. You know, I was lucky, and I'm just going to ramble. I just want to say a couple of things. I was lucky enough to have a little time with William Burroughs, and he and Allen Ginsberg and some of those folks up through the auspices of Naropa University, which is a Buddhist school in Boulder, Colorado. And they have the Jack Kerouac's School of Disembodied Poetics, whatever that means. And but Anne Waldman, a brilliant writer. I don't know what's happened to Anne. She wrote a great book called Fast Talking Woman, which was like a very powerful shamanistic woman's awakening poem. It went on and on and on. Anyway, in that world of, you know, of Naropa University, there was a Tibetan teacher there called Chogyam Trungpa. And he hit Allen Ginsberg's vast mind so hard. They had a poetry reading up in Vermont, and Allen got up and read poetry, and he was looking at Trungpa Rinpoche as a kind of a, you know, a new force in the post-beat kind of awakening movement, I would say. And Allen read his poetry up in Barnett, Vermont, and then he introduced Chogyam Trungpa, the lineage holder who had escaped Tibet and been educated in England, and then run off with a lord's young daughter and come to America to teach Dharma to people. And after Allen read his poems, you know, very respectful and stuff, and he introduced to Chogyam Trungpa, who picked up the meditation gong, put it over his head. This was his poem, and put the bell upside down over his head and started beating on it. And that was quite a statement for his first poetry reading in the United States. I only mention that because, as we used to say in Texas with the Free Mexican Air Force, expect the unexpected. And I think that these moments of jolting us out of complacency and sort of this ennui, I know that this COVID time for me has been a time of like swimming in the murk, even though I try and outsmart it, and it takes some discipline. And I think, well, I won't get into that so much because I know everybody's is on track with you know, putting their best foot forward and putting aspirations out into the world, you know, for goodness and benefit. But to wake up in the morning and as I think the adage that came out of the Trungpa gong ringing incident for Allen Ginsberg was something that Trungpa Rinpoche said to him, which was first thought, best thought. And that became Allen Ginsberg's entire approach from then on. And he'd already written Howl and all that, the beat poetry. And he continued on with the Wichita Vortex and all those things. And during the summer workshops up at Naropa, I was lucky enough to get there as a songwriting teacher at the at the Naropa Institute of Disembodied Poetics. And first thought, best thought is a theme, and I think it's sort of been galvanizing everybody's ideas here in this workshop. And one of the great inspirations to me is Butch Hancock, in that I could never put anything past Butch that he didn't make a song out of. I remember once I said, Butch, man, I'm reading this great Greek philosopher here, translation called, his name is Diogenes. And Diogenes, who lived in a barrel and philosophized from living in a barrel. And Butch goes, yeah, Diogenes, Diogenes, die. And he made up an entire song at the moment about Diogenes. Now, that's first thought, best thought. And it's really about, music for me has always been about listening. And I think the great theme of this workshop has been listen to your mind, listen to you never know. And something you don't write down, maybe you know what I mean? You always feel like that's the one that got away. I'll wake up at night, and another thing that Butch taught me about was palindromes. And Butch, if you're listening, I'd love you to contribute some palindromes to this thing. In fact, he once wrote a song that was entirely a palindrome, which is if I'm not mistaken, is a thought that develops from subject to object and then reverses itself backwards from object to subject. There you are, Butch. What's a palindrome?
What is Buddhism? And
I've heard of it.
Peter,
I don't know,
Peter, it's so awesome to see you. I'll tell you one palindrome that I didn't write a whole song that was a palindrome, but I wrote a verse that told a whole story that took eight or nine verses to tell, and then I summed it up in a palindrome. It's about a couple of characters that are going to give each other dogs. It's a word palindrome, not spelled frontwards and backwards, but the words are frontwards and backwards. Yeah. And this couple of characters, Split and Slide, okay? Split, ship slide, that dog that bites nobody around, all sure makes it tough. That's when down, 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 down dogs sit. Sit dogs down, 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 down. When that's tough, it makes sure all around nobody bites that dog that slide ship Split. That took Peter. That took me 3 days to write that.
Right, but I think we need we need a new cowboy hero, palindrome. Palindrome.
That's great. Palindrome. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that blows my mind. Frank Wakefield, the great bluegrass mandolin player, he has we don't know if he's faking it, but he has a thing called back talkwards. And he just does everything backwards. Like he'll answer the phone, goodbye, Ham, how am I?
Yeah.
But he's consistent. He's consistent in this. And David Nelson of the New Riders of the Purple Sage and Frank are good friends. And Nelson picked up this ability to back talkwards. In fact, when the New Riders did a song of mine called Panama Red, Dave Nelson is able to sing the chorus completely back talkwards. Red in the Nippa is Panama Red. Duranipid. Yeah, Duranipid. Yeah, yeah. He's got a whole language that's backwards. But anyway, that's a good way to get the mind confused enough so it might come up with something. And
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
like to pay a little homage here, you guys. Butch, thank you so much. I'd like to pay some homage to the guys I was lucky enough, Texas writers. Robert Earl Keen and I were neighbors in Nashville, and we went through the grinder down there together. And um, and also living in town at that time, the first person that invited me over when I got to town was Guy Clark. And I didn't understand the procedure, which was co-writing. And turns out co-writing is this sort of major force. And, I came to Guy's house and he's looking through his notebooks and he's saying a verse and this and that. And he never said, "You got anything that can go with this?" He was just waiting. And I didn't realize that was the way you do it is you got a little something and you play it for someone else and the other guy, you just jump in, and that takes confidence. And I noticed not living in Nashville, there are a lot of folks there are a lot of individualistic people that don't co-write at all. And yet, when Adele received her Grammy a few years ago, I was there for a bluegrass project and I looked at the program, and Adele's hit had like six writers. Six writers. The producer was a writer. Her manager was a writer. She was a writer. And then a bunch of other musicians in her band were writers. Now, of course, that's a great, fair way to split the success. If everybody's so committed and probably working on spec, right? Everybody know what working on spec's all about? That's when they don't pay you. You are working on the speculation that your success is just around the corner. But I thought that was amazing that Adele's song had all these people as co-writers, which meant that, that meant the drummer put a part in there that was equally as important to the song as the lyrics. And maybe just to provided help the arrangement and stuff like that. And I know along those lines, and I'm just sort of free associating, along those lines, Jamie Oldacre, who was the drummer for Eric Clapton, when Eric went solo after Cream, Jamie Oldacre's from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he played with J.J. Cale and Leon Russell and the rest of those gang up there, and Jim Keltner, of course, who you might have heard a lot of Ry Cooder, a lot of different records, a lot of those records from Shelter, and but Jamie, when Clapton went solo, he got those hits like I Shot the Sheriff and Cocaine and he started getting really on the hit parade. He cut everybody into his royalties, and sometimes songwriting is such a personal thing; it becomes like a little shell, And so the workshops like this are great because they're all about co-writing, all about sharing. But I always thought that was amazing. Jamie just passed away recently. He had was affliction of cancer. God bless him. He was such a great person, but his generous spirit reflected that whole approach. That Clapton had been in these groups where everybody's trying to get their share, and when he went solo, he just said, everybody's contributing to this, so everybody is essentially getting a royalty based not on the copyright but on the participation. It's a kind of co-writing. So co-writing and sharing and making arrangements are a really interesting aspect of mutual support. And when I mentioned William Burroughs earlier, he had a technique that he taught that we've used I used it over at Kerrville a few times. It's basically it's called I forget what it's called. It's just like a patchwork. It's like everybody writes a line, or maybe two lines, a thought, or simply a thought, first thought, best thought, and you put it in a hat. You pull it out of the hat randomly, and it's amazing what you get. And then you can do it again and again and get something different each time with the same words, which Burroughs, one of his weird, his cryptic intelligence was about that. You know, we're taught linearly. You know, you remember diagramming sentences in school? Yeah, subject, object, verb, or predicate, what they say. And that's interesting stuff. It goes back to the Greeks. Diogenes, die. Yeah. But Burroughs, it's called the cut up. A friend of his, Byron Geisen, a painter, came up with it. And you can imagine for painting, you know, you just assemble pieces of shapes and you come up with like a collage of interesting things. But to apply it to writing, you could try this. Everybody could try this. Just take a random line and throw it in your hat. And then after a day or so, you know, whenever you've filled up enough to read it, and it's all out of order, right? The first thought didn't begin there, but it all makes some kind of sense. It's kind of uncanny. And Butch, I really love that that poem, or it was a song you were singing in the beginning about. I guess you had put one thought a day down. Was that what it was? Just one sentence, was it? Yeah. Well,
one line a day, I think, but
one line a day. There you go. There's the song.
Yeah,
That's the song right there.
that was one line a day. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I was just
one.
admiring that.
Yeah, Peter, that was one line a day, but I had to wait till the day told me what the line was. I had to stay out of the way, but it opened my ears and my mind and heart up to listen all day long. It was amazing time. Yeah.
One of the people that I worked with early on when I was in my 20s was the father of bluegrass music, Bill Monroe, and he had an interesting way of writing songs. He would write titles, and he had a shoebox on his bus that he kept up in the bay over the shotgun seat. And I mean, this bus was a late 50s flexible flyer, a very strange bus. And we called it the Bluegrass Breakdown for obvious reasons, because it was mostly in repair while we were on the road, which made getting to the gig very exciting. But he had a shoebox full of titles, and I remember that he'd take that shoebox out and he'd read a few titles, you know, and he was very private about it. He didn't share, but I thought that was interesting. He had just maybe one-liners or titles of songs, and that was his little shoebox of ideas. And of course, now we're in the computer age, and everybody's got all kinds of stuff filed away. And one other thing I'd like to say is that for me, the musical instruments that are available to us to touch have a real inspiring quality to them. I imagine everybody's got a favorite guitar or a favorite stringed instrument they like, or a piano. And often I will just play something random. For example, let's see if I can do this. I'll prop this iPad up on Edward Gibbon's History of the Decline of Fall of the Roman Empire. and up against Sir Patrick O'Brien here. This usually works. Whoop. As you can see, I'm really computer literate here. I've got everything just perfect. All right. Can everybody see me still? So the other day I was fooling around with I have to say, since the COVID thing has started, I found myself taking out some older instruments that I wouldn't even think of taking on the road. But and I got this one in Nashville when I lived there the second time in the 80s. It's a Ramirez flamenco guitar. And I find that, you know, just like when you pick up a Martin from the 40s or earlier, or an old Gibson, you know, I mean, these instruments have soul. They're living things. The wood is still alive in this thing. This is made of cypress, which is a wetland swamp wood. Used to be the cheapest wood you would get for a gypsy guitar, which a flamenco guitar is. But so here's like a flamenco chord. It's so weird. It's a little bit anxious sounding, and it's an E with the like this. But in fooling with these instruments now, Town Van Zandt and I hung out, and he asked me at one time. Well, one thing he said was, "Man, why don't you play Midnight Moonlight slow like you used to?" And I thought, I've never played Midnight Moonlight slow. What was he talking about? But I listened because he was saying was like the blues guys say, take your time. Take your time. You know, and coming out of bluegrass, man, there's such an emphasis on playing everything fast, you know. And so, I mean, that really hit me. And I just, you know, I started playing Midnight more like, you know, if you ever feel lonesome and you're down in San Antonio, what he was saying was, man, get the words out. Let the words tell the story. It doesn't have to be the style. You know, there's such an emphasis on style when you get into something like bluegrass. Anyway, I was always really happy to see Willie Nelson playing a gut string guitar. So going back to the origins of the guitar, this is a copy, as most of these shapes are, of the original six-string guitar by Manuel Torres. About 1860, he finally got a shape that worked for what became the Spanish guitar. And but you know, a gut string guitar has a lot of soul. And for instance, the other day I think I was watching Netflix. I don't know, and I keep a guitar in my lap, and as you know, most of us do habitually. And I came up with a chord. I mean, it's a simple chord, but by itself, without any, just the three notes. And I was just listening to like, oh, that's really great.
588-2300 Empire.
Today.
800-588-2300.
Thank you. That's a word from our sponsor. I don't know where that came.
That was an amazing chord.
You see what happens. You see what happens. You strike a chord, and then all of a sudden, man, you never know. But and I don't even know if it sounds that cool now, but I ended up with this chord, which I think Dave Rawlings showed me one time. No, that couldn't be it. Oh yes, it's this. It's a C chord, the bottom part of a C chord. Just by itself, instead of just the bottom voicing. But it's like typical, you know, da, da, da. It's like taps. But if you drop it down two, you start to get this resonance. Now I thought, what if you started from there? I never play in that key or that voicing. Anyway, it's a mood that comes out of there. Yeah, it's just like you play the bottom and then drop it down too, and you get this open. Now, I'm not somebody who plays these chords much, but I find that by making a study out of it and doing exercises like just keeping the same position. Oh, yeah, there's a different note that sounds great. And F sharp. I call these the mystery chords because if you immerse your, oh, that's where the camera is. Okay, so if you immerse your if you immerse your mind in these tonalities and don't expect anything from it, in other words, don't try and, you know, our tendency is to want to make something of it, right? Make the song, make it work, make it happen. Of course, that's always great. But I find that these tonalities have a way of working on the mind, and often it's as offhand as you're doing something else. And it's not that you're trying to do anything, but you just sort of amble around on the fingerboard a little bit, and you find these juxtapositions of tones. Butch, do you find that to be true? You kind of just put your mind in a place, right?
Absolutely. You know, all of songwriting, in fact, for me, has become really an exploration. You know, you're looking for something, you don't know what it is, but you know it when you hear it. And and that's something, you know, you mentioned Towns. Towns, remember, he said, don't worry about the meaning. The meaning will take care of itself if you get the tone and everything the tone means, the tone of the poetry, the tone of the music itself. But that's, yeah. So, yeah, exploring and just one little note changing wow, where did that come? Why didn't I know that before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to go back to these places. Sometimes you can't really duplicate them, but I'm just thinking of how to prime the pump and get the juices flowing, really, is all I'm talking about. Anybody have any questions that I can help with? Otherwise, I don't know what else.
Yeah, we've got Grover here. He's got his hand up
Peter,
first, so we're going to let him go.
Okay.
Peter, it's great to meet you. I grew up listening to bluegrass and country, you know, going round and round on the tractor.
Yeah.
And I've played bluegrass most of my life. What did you mean drop it down to? I have my guitar in my lap. I was making the C chord and I couldn't figure out the drop it down to. I was trying to match those tones.
Oh, yeah. You keep the same position and drop it down 2 frets.
On the neck.
Yeah, down towards the nut. Lower. Drop it down. You know, it's
Towards the nut.
funny. Funny you mentioned on the tractor,
Yeah.
because I asked Bill Monroe one night when we were on the road, and you know, he did most of his talking after midnight, because that's when everything was quiet, and I had just finished driving the bus, and I remember asking him in a conversation that went on and on and on. I mean, it was the kind of conversation that you just pick up next time you would get into that space. And I asked him, where did he start to feel, find his sort of like, how did you, I didn't say, how did you find your voice, but I said, how did you, uh, you know, where did you start when you, where were you when you started to feel that songs were coming to you? And he said that when his brothers had come back from World War One, he was, see, he was born in 1913, so he was maybe, was it 1908? 18 was the war, right? So he was like just a young kid. He said he woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he heard this singing, and it was his brothers walking home from the Rosine, Kentucky railroad depot. There's a lot of lumber up in that part of Kentucky, and that the railroad was important for them to ship lumber. The Monroe family were into lumber and trees. I don't know if they had their own mill, but yeah, they must have had their own mill, which is something Bill never mentioned. But he said waking up at about 4 a.m. on a spring evening and hearing this sound, and the song was, by and by, when the morning comes, when all the saints of God shall gather home. And it goes on, we'll understand it better by and by. Now, these are young men in their late teens. Bill's the youngest of 9 children, or youngest of 8. And he's in his bed at home, and he wakes up, and it's just before sunrise. And these veterans from World War One, which includes 3 of his brothers, are walking home in the early morning Kentucky, you know, just before light, walking home from the train depot, having come back from World War One, singing a hymn like that. I mean, that is just a chill bump moment. And he said it began to strike him that he had a song in him. And his songs are full of, I would say, that feeling, but he never wrote a song about that. He wrote a song about the old home place and want to go back, you know, the light shines up on the hill, but you know, no one lives there anymore, that kind of bluegrassy thing. And the other thing he said was, I said, where did you start to get the idea of tone? And he said, and this goes back to what you just said about riding the tractor. When you're working, I mean, a lot of the great poets, when they had a 9-to-5 job, you know, William Carlos Williams, all these people, they're not like us. They didn't sit around playing a guitar. They worked, and their mind was always sharp. And the inspiration part of their mind was already being nurtured by their activity of trying to do a day job, to make, you know, working for an insurance company, stuff like that. Who was it that was a toll collector in New York? Was it Whitman? But this whole idea of the artist in a vacuum of creativity is a fairly recent and sort of rare thing. I'm going to start getting all afield here, but I want to just finish this one thought about Bill Monroe, and that was when he was working, plowing the field. That was a big step for his brothers to take the youngest kid and said, "This is how you do it, Billy, and now you're on your own," because his parents had passed on by the time he was 8. And he lived with his uncle, Penn Vandiver, who was a fiddle player, really inspired him about a lot of his music.
Uncle Penn.
Uncle Penn, yes. But he said, when I was plowing behind a mule, he said, that's when I would start singing. And I thought, wow, because Bill was the youngest of all those boys and sister. And he had buck teeth. He was cross-eyed. And so he came up hard against, some disabilities. And for him to be plowing behind a mule had to have been a big step anyway. And he said that he'd be out there, he would do his rows, and maybe the brothers would come and say, "But you're doing all right, Billy. It's a straight row, you're doing all right." But he found that that's where he could let his voice, it's like Butch was saying about the wide open spaces of West Texas, Buddy Holly land, I mean, just the name Buddy Holly is like the vast spaces of West Buddy Holly. This is West Texas. And I won't even get into what Texas has meant to me in terms of turning my life around, but it certainly is where the language and poetry is still there. Frank Hill, does that name ring a bell to anybody? One of the great spontaneous poets of Texas, Frank Hill, probably wrote more songs than any of us ever will. And last I saw him, he was living in Johnson City. He'd come back from the Northwest. But so here's young Bill Monroe, and he sees nothing but the furrows that he's plowing with the mule. And that concentration has left his mind free. And he would vocalize. And he said, in those days, he said, in Kentucky, when people finished work, whether it be up in the hills doing the trees or out in the fields plowing, he said, everybody would whoop. I said, what's a whoop? And of course, this is what my mother used to do to call us for supper. Woo, boys, come home. Everybody in Kentucky would whoop at sundown. And he said that everybody knew whose whoop was whose. Old Jasper over there and 2 miles away is going, whoa, woo, and then somebody over in this hill over here is going to go, hey, woo. And, imagine that's the music of Bill Monroe, is people whooping at sundown because work is over and they're communicating. Probably, woo-hoo, yeah, let's go drink some moonshine. I mean, you never know but that people communicating non-verbally. And I think, music is full of that. And we, as songwriters, to come up with words, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. And just to finish, I think I'm finishing this thought. Oh, I have something else to say. But, I have too many books. One of the books I've gone back to is this one right here, which is the original manuscript of On the Road by Jack Kerouac. And it will make you weep because it's a picture of America in the mid-40s, before the Korean War, after World War II. I was born in 42. And I do remember some of the things that Jack Kerouac saw, like, for instance, a truckload of college kids on the back of a pickup, riding all night, standing up, going out to pick apples in Washington State, riding out from Montana to do some summer work picking apples, and just it's very powerful to read these narrative histories of. I mean, isn't it, Jack was a different kind of writer than like William Burroughs. Of course, they all hung out a little bit. Burroughs being sort of like the remote guru, but committed to what they were doing. And I would just say that I just want to say that the legendary first draft. I mean, yeah, you can see why they edited it, but Jack was well read, and I encourage everybody to read a lot of stuff, but especially about America. It is such an interesting history, and we're in such a time now of polarization that it's like, wow, you know, there's very little place that people that don't agree with me are going to hear what I have to say. You know, I'll hear what they have to say because they're out there. You know, I'm not. I mean, I'm on the liberal side of things. I think you would have to say, but you know what I mean. It's like this is like the '60s because people are out in the streets saying their thing, and it's a great opportunity to come up with maybe something that can pierce this veil of desperate confrontation that's taking place. Anyway, we'll see. It's politics. Can't really get into that. I want to say one other thing about Bill Monroe is he wrote a song called Kentucky Waltz. We were waltzing that night in Kentucky beneath the beautiful harvest moon. Well, I've been hanging out over in Hawaii over the past few years and recording with some folks over there because they're playing a kind of the traditional stuff is really still alive. And we found a recording from 1915 called Pualilia that is the melody for Kentucky Waltz. And it was recorded by, and you can find this John K. Almeida, the Portuguese last name, Almeida. It's now on, you can now Google it, John K. Almeida. And you will hear in 1915 a song that was a hit for Bill Monroe in the 40s. I just want to say. And now I'll just wrap up the Bill Monroe portion and just, but I will extol Hawaiian music a little bit after that, as it had a big part to play in Texas music. I'm sorry, I'm seeing myself with strange shadows. What's going on with this face here, man? Hey, I've just aged fucking 50 years, man. Well, sorry. Bill Monroe said, I would never steal another man's note, but I might write one song off another. Yeah. Just a little bit about Hawaiian music and this idea of mellifluousness in music. When the United States pineapple barons and sugar barons who had gotten the rights to grow their crops in Hawaii, when they had taken over the government of Hawaii and created a provisional government under a U.S. protectorate, and Queen Liliuokalani, who wrote Aloha Oi, was imprisoned in the Aone Palace, the band leader of the Royal Hawaiian Orchestra, Makea, was asked to sign a loyalty oath to the new U.S. Rulers, and he refused. He refused, and so he and a bunch of musicians quit the Royal Hawaiian Orchestra and went on the road. Guess where? As a U.S. protectorate, they could come over here and work with no visa, no nothing. And so where did they go? They went to Texas. And who did they play with? They played with Jimmy Rogers, the blue yodeler, who was from Mississippi, but by then, in the mid, he didn't have a long life, but in the 20s, he was writing songs in Texas with Hawaiian musicians, and they were in his band. So the whole slide guitar thing is originated in Hawaii, became part of Texas music through Jimmy Rogers, and I think there's still a distinctive strain in that, but it comes mostly through the songwriting, because that was the adventure. Jimmy Rogers was making up blues out of old blues and sentimental songs, and his sister Carrie was writing the melodies on the piano. And I've studied him. He must have been a character, man, because he lived fast. He was a rounder, and he wrote so many songs, sang so many songs, and this whole yodel thing, just to wrap this thought up, the that's right out of Hawaii. And so Texas music has got a great dose of the islands. I rest my case. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I believe Chris Vincent has a question for you.
Okay.
Yes. So I don't know. I always tend to get things backwards. I know Daniel and Sonny and my group down there have always joked that I'm kind of doing it backwards. I usually start getting like the lyrics forwards, or writing the music, the words first. And I guess it's because in my head I always hear the song playing when I'm writing it, but it's where to put the actual chords in.
Yeah.
Where I have the problems. How can I fix that?
Well, one of my favorite songs I ever heard was a song that did not win the songwriting prize at Kerrville, but it was a kid. He was just like a ranch kid and farm kid, and he had this song, and it had only one chord. And he said, "The storm is coming up as thick as a pig." And of course, everybody was like, "This guy's, I'm sorry, dude, that's not intellectual." I thought it was the best metaphor I ever heard. the storm was coming up as thick as a pig. Man, and so don't discount anything. But I would say, what instrument do you play, if I may ask?
I'm learning guitar. I've actually started learning the guitar because of this song that got stuck in my head.
And how does the song go? Recite it, a little bit of it.
Let's see. Let's see. Just let me sit and drink my whiskey and beer.
As thick as a pig. Right on.
I think it's best if no one comes near.
Yeah.
You think you know me, but you don't. If you think I'm a coward, you'd be wrong. I'm just better left alone. And the chorus goes, so don't go getting on this crazy ride, because if you do, son, you better go run and hide. Boy, am I making myself clear. You better get the hell out of here, because I got anger in high gear.
Who's that? Whose voice is that?
Mine.
I mean, that's you talking to a kid?
No, this is me. This is my song. I'm not talking to a kid. I'm just talking to. It's an in general song that it just came to me while I was going through something, and it just, poured out on paper. I was very angry at the time, very in a angry mood. Still kind of am. And yeah, the song is called "Anger in High Gear," and
Man,
I do
that's
have like 3 verses in there, but it's just kind of getting the chords right, getting everything right where it should be.
how do you hear the rhythm?
Kind of like a, let's see. Kind of a like that. It's a kind of a D chord into a C and then to a, I guess you would say, uh, an E power chord.
A sour chord?
An E power chord.
Oh, power chord. Okay.
Yes, sir.
What I hear in that vein is stay on one chord as long as you can instead of making all that movement to begin with.
Okay.
And are your verses 4 lines each?
It's five lines each, and I finally got the last line worked out. Thanks to Daniel, he said something about, he's like, just don't put everything, too much on your plate. And I said, oh, thank you for that. That's the spot I was looking for.
Right.
And he helped me without knowing. So thank you, Daniel.
Well, you're in D.
Yes, sir. This is in D.
Sounds to me like it could be a little bit ominous, You could even have a drop D, but, basically. Well, it's kind of appeared as a bluegrassy kind of thing because a lot of that type of.
Yeah, I think this is kind of almost, I guess you would kind of categorize it into like more of maybe a southern rock or
Yeah,
a.
I was thinking punk, but you kind of lose a lot when you get into the But that's the
Yeah.
feeling of it. It's a very angry song.
Yes, yeah, it could be kind of bluesy, southern rockish, you know, is what I was kind of going for. So it's more of a slower.
I think you should uncomplicate the guitar part and just kind of go, use that guitar sequence, those chords as an accent. Don't try and build a song on those chords. Just try the one chord and sing over it as long as you can. That way you don't have to think about what your hands are doing.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem right there is getting my hands to go along with what I'm actually trying to do. And I mean, I can get maybe about 2 chords in, like from the beginning to the end of one part to the other. But this is mainly like at the end of the actual, after I say it, like for instance, once I go into, I think it's best if no one comes near, and then right after, then it goes, and then it goes into the you think you know me, but you don't. So it's going to be more of a kind of a thing. Is what I'm kind of trying to go, maybe 2 chords at the most in the entire line.
Well, I hear a phrase like, you think you know me, but you don't.
Yes, sir.
That's a good little hook. I mean, the guitar for an accent, but I wouldn't try and sing over it. That'd be hard.
Yeah, no, I'm trying not to sing over it. I'm trying just to kind of get it right where it should be. But I'm guessing that for my one-on-one, I'm going to be probably working a lot on this. But
Well, try
thank you
this.
so much.
Try this. Just try the idea of singing whatever your line is. It could be one or two lines of what you got there, and then just put that guitar thing in there. Go, whatever. Sing. That way, at least it'll free you up to get the singing out over the D chord.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, sir.
Maybe that'll help.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. Again, thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
You
Yeah,
take care. Thank you.
this is wild. Anything I can comment on? And anybody have a question? You're all way into the process. I mean, from what I've been watching, everybody's picked it right up, gone with it. A question from Craig.
That was quick. Talk a little bit. I like to write bluegrass. I like to write, kind of three chords in the truth type country. Curious as to what you think about tired melodies, and melodic originality versus the way a lot of the three chords in the truth type songs, you tend to pull out that same old rhythm line, that same old chord progression, that same old. Does a melody like that with that classic sound get tired to you, or do you see a big importance in melodic originality? Or if I'd love to hear your opinion on that, particularly in the field of like bluegrass.
Well, I actually, if you listen, my song "Land of the Navajos," when I wrote it, my aunt pointed out to me it was the Wabash Cannonball. Well, 100 miles, 100 miles from nowhere, out on the desert sand. One-eyed Jack the Trader held some turquoise in his hand. To the Atlantic Ocean, to the wide Pacific shore. So I stole it. I mean, but it's a good melody. Some of those songs are great. Woody Guthrie basically rewrote all the Carter family songs with his lyrics. And he wrote a singer you might remember named Utah Phillips, the golden voice of the Southwest. He knew Woody through the Wobblies, the unions back in the labor camp days, which was, think about that, the labor camps that they went up into the 1950s, where prisoners, America's men were put to work in these camps to maintain the forests, to build conservancies, create state parks. Anyway, Utah Phillips, I asked him one day before he passed on, I said, did Woody Guthrie ever really join the Communist Party? And he said, well, the thing about Woody was he was interested in the ideas of sharing it, but he said he could never get the paperwork done. And I said, okay, that sounds like the Woody Guthrie I want to know. But Woody wrote a letter, according to Utah. He said Woody wrote a letter to Maybelle Carter when he made his first record. Actually, he sent the record to Maybelle. And Maybelle wrote back and said, you sounded really good, Woody. Maybelle wrote him a letter. And that borders on getting into this whole idea of whose property is the music. And I would say, if you have a calling to write in a melody, no matter whose it is or what it is, go there, get the song done, and then kind of refine it a little bit. I mean, I may be writing the same melody over and over my entire life without even knowing it. They often say that, well, they often say many things, but I won't get into that. But there's a melody I've been working on for a while. Come on in. There's an old tune called, well, come all you timers and listen to my tale. Well, it became known as the country blues. And many songs have been written off that, including, as I went out for to take a little walk, I walked upon that wild Bill Jones. He was a walking and a talking by my little girl's side. Asked him to leave her alone. He said, my age is 21, too old for to be controlled. I drew my revolver from my side. I destroyed that poor boy's soul. Pass that whiskey jug around. Let's all go on a spree. Today saw the last of Wild Bill Jones. Tomorrow see the last of me. I mean, those kinds of melodies, they still work. Even the Walls of Time is a bit of that, The wind is blowing across the mountain and down o'er the valley way below. It sweeps the grave of my darling. When I die, that's where I want to go. Now, the one thing I noticed about what they had been calling for so many years folk music, it was all basically, Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea. Michael rowed the boat ashore. Hallelujah. A lot of that comes from Leadbelly, of course, who wrote Irene Goodnight, another great melody that Woody stole and made his own. But these more bluesy things, the song about the alcohol song, I was going to say, what I would do is I put that in an open tuning and play it with a knife. I put it into E, and just da, 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 with a knife. You just play, you only can play 3 chords, basically. But anyway, I took that old, that minor mountain melody thing, and I tried to write a new one that goes, come all ye saints and sinners who travel on the wheel, believing in appearances as real. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Na, 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 na. Who, let's see. And who, anyway. I mess around with a lot of those traditional melodies because they seem to be able to hang the poetry on them in a natural way. But I try and do a little something to make it a little bit different. Yeah. And I mean, everybody wants to write a song, but I mean, really, I think I just finished one of what's going to be a good song. It took 35 years. Started it in Nashville, wrote on it in Texas, and finished it the other day so that I can record it with a Tex-Mex band called Los Tex Maniacs down in San Antonio. I mean, you carry these songs around with you for eons, it seems like, I mean, some of these songs, I started doing these, exploring what in Buddhism they call the 6 realms of existence. That is, the sort of states of mind that you could be born into if you didn't outsmart your own fate. And I wrote a song about the animal realm. I'm an animal. This is what I do. But it's vast because it's many kinds of animals. But even in the depths of hellish suffering, there's a dream of heaven. And so that became my theme. Just that one song that I can't remember how to play right now. But songs don't always get finished on time, I find.
Well, thank you for that answer. I really appreciate it. That was great.
I hope I contributed something.
You very much did. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's another great person that lives out here, Ramblin' Jack Elliott. He's only written one song. One song. It's called 32 Green Street. It's about a trip he took with Billy Fair, the old folk banjo player from New York, and they drove to New Orleans. Oh, he drove to New Orleans with a bunch of guys out of New York to find Billy Fair, who was living in New Orleans. And it
was 912 greens.
Oh, man, what a song.
Yeah.
And he describes going there and they drink a lot and they find Billy Fair after being lost and they drink and they stay up all night. And the climax of the song is they walk out in the early morning in New Orleans and one of the girls takes off all her clothes and dances in the courtyard. Right, Butch?
Yeah, around a banana tree.
Right. He's only written one song.
And Peter, that song it's all talked. It's all conversation, right. Telling a story, but then it ends with the most magnificent little ending of chorus kind of a thing. Did you ever stand and shiver?
Yeah.
Just because you were looking at a river.
Oh.
I mean, it don't get no better than that, Peter.
One song he's written in his entire life.
Yeah.
No, that is one of my absolute favorites. And, he got a lot from, Guy Clark talk about now, listen to this, everybody. What you can get from just one lick. This is a Jack Elliott lick that comes from a combination of Freight Train and Railroad Bill. No, that's that song. And Guy got that. About the guy in Dallas. Guy took that lick, man, and he made it his own, and it inspired him. He loved Ramblin' Jack. Did you ever? That's it, man. That's the song. Did you ever stop and shiver? Cause you're looking at a river. Oh man, Butch, thank you. That's something else, man. That is something else. Oh, Jack. He lives just down the road from me here. I live on Tennessee Valley Road. And Jack said, you know why they call it Tennessee Valley? And I said, no, why? He said, because the ship Tennessee wrecked off the shore right there. So they named it Tennessee Valley Road. I'm saying, really? You know? Yeah. Jack has a sailing dory out in Marshall. That's about 12, 15 miles from here. Need to go see him. I need to go see him. I never had a short conversation with Jack, and what makes me worry a little bit is that last time I talked to him, he said, well, I got to go. And I said, wait, usually we talk for like an hour. I mean, you give him an opening. And he has a great story, and it's a song that you could anybody could sing. And a lot of it, think about the talking blues, all you songwriters. Maybe what you're writing is talking blues, Said Luke the Drifter to Ramblin' Jack, I do believe you're wearing my hat. Said Jack to Luke, that ain't no fluke. I got my hat down in Montana. And Luke said, no, I got that same hat in Montgomery, Alabama. So I wrote this song about Luke the Drifter and Ramblin' Jack arguing about whose hat was that, Because now Luke the Drifter, there's another interesting thing there. Luke the Drifter was Hank Williams' alternative name. He was his alter ego. Now, I don't know if Fred Rose or anybody over in Nashville had said, Hank, those sentimental songs like that, they're more like Luke the Drifter songs. But Hank adopted a separate personality to sing songs like it's a picture from life's other side, someone who's lost by the way, whose life has gone out with the tide, who may have been happy someday. A poor old mother alone at home, longing to hear from her loved one so dear. It's a picture from life's other side. See, those aren't the Hank Williams love songs. Those are the Luke the Drifter songs. Now, I think songwriters, if you have a problem writing a song, make up a personality that's not you. Make up an alter ego. Call yourself something else. Say, you could just make it up. Fantasize like you did when you were a kid, and like say, okay, well, this is me. I'm looking at the song and everything, but who's the voice? It's maybe somebody like Luke the Drifter would be singing that song, or Panama Red. The weird thing is, I never claimed to be anybody Panama Red. There's several Panama Reds, but people calling me Panama, and I got a reputation for being the person in the song, but I try to live up to it, but man, that's a losing battle, right? No, here's what I say to people. Have an impossible goal, an absolutely impossible goal. Like you're going to paint a masterpiece, but don't make it about a song. Let the song be free. Let the voice be free and the song be free, but have like an impossible goal, like trying to attain enlightenment, have something that's really going to stretch you in a different direction. I mean, it could be plowing a straight furrow behind a mule. I mean, that's a goal. And that's why Bill's mind became free when he was working hard. I saw an impossible goal and an alter ego. I'd like to have everybody report in who their alter ego is, their pseudonym. Because in the days of the Free Mexican Air Force, everybody was afraid to use their own name.
That happened with me, that I created a character who was a songwriter and wrote songs for that character. I never could write songs on my own, but as Tucker, my character, I just knock out these songs, and I always wondered, why is it that I can write songs as Tucker but not as myself? And then I realized that Tucker's not the perfectionist that I am. He doesn't care if the song sucks or not,
That's the guy.
That's the guy. He just wants to get it out, and he does. But me,
and he's your best friend.
I labor over every word, so it's easier to write as an alter ego. I
think you're right. Gary Nicholson has Gary? Well, he'll be on. He'll talk about it. He has a complete alter ego as a blues guy named Whitey something. And that's where he flows. As this guy, as the character. Whitey Johnson. Whitey Johnson. But that's where he just totally flows in that character. It's like he doesn't have to pretend anything. He just wears a costume. And like wearing a hat. That'll do it. That'll put you there. Any kind of hat.
So, Peter, I believe we have Grover, and he has been waiting patiently to ask you a question here for quite a while.
Oh,
let him
please.
Go.
Yes.
Sorry to bug you again, Peter.
No, man.
I'm going to go back a little bit in your talk. You were talking about like the mountain blues.
Yeah.
It's so far away from what I learned in school about 12-bar blues. And anyway, what kind of progression, like 1, 3, 1, 2, I'm trying to figure out, because in your mountain blues, you've got to have some minor chords you're playing.
Now, the weird thing about, can I just make a comment and I'll let you continue?
You're good.
The weird thing about what you're talking about, the mountain blues, you play in a major key and you sing in a minor key. Pretty Polly, come go along with me. That's the weirdness. That's the hurt. That's what they call the hurt.
That is true.
Polly, pretty Polly, come go along with me. Now, the banjos would probably, take out that note. But that's the weirdness right there. There is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. It has been the ruin of many poor girls and me, oh Lord, and one.
Did you
It's
have
the
to
weird
work
juxtaposition between gospel music and the blues.
Did you have to work at singing in the minor over the major?
I'm still working at singing the minor over the major. Truthfully.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you.
But think of, Bob Dylan really discovered something, because listen to some of his things. It's all right, Mom. I'm only bleeding. Those chords work. I mean, he was great in that stuff because he expanded. That's basically an open tuning that he's playing. He's playing an open D, but he's got. Think of Bye Bye Love. is in major, but the riff is, it's all right, Mom. It's life and life only. I think that's what the aim of that the alcohol song, which was yeah, the blues. I asked Bill Monroe where he first really heard the blues. He didn't say it was from Uncle Arnold Schultz, the black laborer that worked up there with Uncle Penn. He said it was in New Orleans where Arnold Schultz was from. And he said he took Flatt and Scruggs down there. He said those boys were green. He said I had to give them some learning. He took them to New Orleans. And I said, what kind of music could you find down there, Bill? And he goes, well, a man could find any kind of music, you know. Being a musician, you know what he's talking about. But actually, he said, well, what a man could find down there at that time, Pete, was, of course, you had jump time, and you had sock time, and of course, you had the slow drag. The slow drag. Didn't he ramble? Didn't he ramble? He rambled round and round till the police shot him down. They used to sing that when, you know, one of the rounders had a funeral. They played slow going to the graveyard. Didn't he ramble? Didn't he ramble? He rambled round and round till the police shot him down. Then on the way back from the graveyard, you know, didn't he ramble? Didn't he ramble? Rambled round and round till the police shot him down. Second line. I mean, that's a classic thing. You can still experience that in New Orleans. You can still show your respects and go to the charnel ground, the burying ground. Did you ever stop and shiver? Just because you saw a river. Man. Eddie Gautier. Is that Eddie? Eddie Gautier. Yeah, man. New Orleans. Yes.
Okay, does anybody else have a question? I don't know, Butch or Phoebe might have a question for you too.
Actually, I have one, if it's okay. This is Keith.
Hey.
You know, earlier you were talking about how melodies sort of recycle, they just come back around. And I remember reading this story from Nashville where somebody said to Grandpa Jones, did you hear that this person's just cut a new song? And he just wrote a new song, and Grandpa Jones said, oh, really? What's it the tune to? So they just kind of keep rolling around. But I did want to ask you about how you came up with this mixing of reggae and bluegrass.
All right. Now, Bill Monroe had a song called Blue Moon of Kentucky, right? And it was, you know, originally played completely as a waltz. And that really was his song. Kentucky Waltz, he got that melody from the Hawaiians. But as far as we know, Blue Moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and proved untrue, or left me blue. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made me blue. And then there's this guy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who got all confused about how that song went, and he sang it. Blue moon, blue moon, blue moon, keep shining down. I said, blue moon of Kentucky, won't you keep on shining? Shine on the one that's gone, said goodbye. Well, it was, Elvis. Well, Bill loved Elvis because Elvis took Bill's waltz and made a rock and roll hit record out of it. I think it was Elvis's second record. And so, whereas the story goes that Elvis came to the Grand Ole Opry and was like sort of rejected, like uncouth, kind of white trashy, pimp dressed guy. Bill loved him. Bill told the stories. A friend of mine, Bill Monroe's stories they need to be collected. But he said, Bill told him, he said, I told Elvis whatever I could do to help him, I'd be happy to. And that's how it stood with me and him. Or that's how it stood with Elvis and me. Well, imagine what a hit record did at that time. Elvis broke through and sold more records than anybody at that time, except Frank Sinatra and maybe Peggy Lee. So Bill came back in the studio and he recorded Blue Moon of Kentucky. And he did the first half with Vassar Clemens on fiddle, young 16-year-old Vassar Clemens. He did shine on the one that's gone, say goodbye. Then the fiddle, he did it up tempo. And for the first time, Bill started to understand what the backbeat, the big beat was. And so his mandolin chops became, which sounds to me a lot like, no woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Which is just a sort of roundabout way of saying that reggae has so many similarities, some musical counterparts in the bluegrass. So I didn't go very far to try and make a point about it. I just liked the way Little Maggie felt as a reggae song. Over yonder stands a little Maggie, and the lyrics: sitting by the banks of the sea with a 44 wrapped around her and a banjo on her knee. That's Jamaica. And so it turns out I met somebody, and she said down in Galveston, and she said that she'd been doing a study of old sea shanties, and Little Maggie shows up as a forecastle song, not a work song, but more like a song that they would make up. Somebody made that song up about somebody out there in the slave trade. Little Maggie, some badass Little Maggie with a pistol and a banjo. That's not about the mountains. That's about a place like Jamaica where white people and black people were in very close contact. And every Christmas time at the big house, at the plantation house, the masters, the bosses, the families, English people, would invite all the workers up, and they'd have a day where they all exchanged their roles. And that's where the minstrel show began. The slave, and they weren't the workers, slave workers, what, any way you want to look at it, the indentured, captive African slaves. But slavery, it is, yes, it is slavery, but they didn't think of themselves as slaves so much as they galvanized their life force into their philosophy of life and their ethic of survival. So when they got up to the big house at Christmas time and they got out to put the top hats on, and the masters served them, this was a tradition. They had to have had pretty good relationships, although, of course there were revolts and all kinds of things. But this is a tradition in Jamaica, and there's an African counterpart to the old Celtic Christmas time solstice figure called the Green Man. And you see pictures of the Green Man. He's got like trees growing out of his head, and he's like a vegetative spirit that's being reborn at the winter solstice. And the Africans also had the same Junkaroo, John the Conqueror, they call it Junkaroo. And he was the same character. And, when you get to Jamaica, it's a different place. If you're from England, you got to let down a few of those barriers, and of course there was lots of interrelationships, children, marriage too. But in the wintertime, when they have these revels up at the big house, and the African slaves would don the garb of their masters. It was one way to kind of break the ice, and and they're drinking like crazy, right? They're all drinking the punch. I actually met a lady. She called herself Fancy at Bob Marley's birthday celebration in 9 Mile, and she told me, and she was very uncanny. I'm not sure she was even human. She could have been a spirit. But she was dressed in yellow, kind of frock dress. She didn't have a bonnet on or anything, but just kind of like, and she was super, super friendly. I said, did you ever go to any of the dances that they used to have back then? She says, oh, my parents did. She said, the quadrilles. She said, I learned how to do quadrilles as a child. And I said, how old are you? And she said, well, I've just been here a long time. She might have been in her 80s, but she was one of those people who had that uncanny youthfulness about them. She didn't look anything. She looked like a 16-year-old. That's Jamaica. Jamaica is a land of spirits. And so I found that not only was there a musical connection between bluegrass and basically Caribbean music, because they were taking Irish jigs and reels and adapting them, interacting with the Africans drumming. So that's where I thought the connection was strong. And they called the Irish prisoners of war were called Pickney, and that Pickaninny is a term. I think that means a half-breed. But the Pickneys and the Redlegs were the Irish whose legs turned red from working in the cane fields because they had white skin, and their legs would turn red. So they were called Redlegs. And a friend of mine over there in Ireland says bluegrass is an offshoot of minstrel music, which is from those Christmas revels. Because, in fact, that song, didn't he ramble, ramble round and round, till the police shot him down. Oh, didn't he ramble? Ragtime music came out of that minstrel thing too. And in fact, I read somewhere in a book about the guy who wrote Lovesick Blues, who was a blackface white singer, that Bob Wills performed in blackface when he was very, very young, and he was touring around. And I cannot remember the name of the guy, the author of that book, but he wrote it. It's about the guy who wrote Lovesick Blues, and a friend of mine, Tony Garnier, who plays bass with Bob Dylan, played me a video one day. He said, "You got to see this, man," because they're all into this thing. And it's an old television clip of somebody knows his name, but it slips my mind right now. And he had this whole shtick. Yes, sir, yes, sir, I got the miseries. Blackface, it's like Amos and Andy. But in those people's minds, it wasn't to make fun of, it was to have a deeper legitimacy. Emmett Miller, thank you so much. Emmett Miller, I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my baby said goodbye. Big hit with the Tommy Dorsey band, and of course Hank Williams. And so there's always been this crossing back and forth. And I didn't see making a reggae record as any kind of political statement at all. I just wanted to make music where people tell you, yes, man, music can change the world. I want to hear that. And that's what those people say. Music, man, can change the world. So, and I wrote a lot down there. That was very inspiring to go there. And I would say, folks, just to wrap up my presentation part of this thing, I always tell folks this. If you have the opportunity to just kind of go out there on a limb a little bit, like travel somewhere, maybe you don't know the language, and you have to pay attention to communication, like go to Italy, fantastic place to be lost. Most people will always try and help you and speak your language. But for a minute, you're in a place like Jamaica and you're totally out of your depth. You don't know what's going on there. People have a whole different way of relating to each other. And then the cook at the hotel says, yes, man, you should come stay at my house. I cook for you there. It's like much cheaper than a hotel. And it's like, how far am I going to go into this adventure of letting go of Peter Rowan and experiencing life as a complete unknown? Something like that. And then we go back to the text. Says here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I would like to also make a little toast to somebody who, in my childhood, was a big influence. Was a guy on WWVA radio. He had a midnight show, and I could pick it up on my dad's Philco under my covers. It was Lee, the coffee drinking night owl. God, Lee. Anyway, and I'll do what he did. I don't know if you can hear it, but he would say, well, I'm going to pick up my D45 guitar here before I play Hank's next record. I'm going to have my wife made me a nice cup of coffee, and I'm going to take a little sip. Oh, that's good. Midnight. He's playing to the truckers. Picks up a D45 guitar. There's a happy child at home. And he would sing. I can't remember his last name. Lee. The coffee drinking night owl. My friends, when I was a kid, were the DJs. I would find a DJ and I would just tune right in because they had the music. And it just kind of gave me a little WWVA, Coffee drinking night owl. And then I was talking to Taj Mahal the other day, and we listened to the same DJ out of Buffalo, New York, George Lorenz, the Hound. George played Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog before he played Elvis Presley's Hound Dog. George Lorenz knew what was happening. He was part of the, Rochester, Buffalo area was a big destination for the Underground Railroad. So a lot of black folk moved up there from the South. And there was a great jazz scene in Rochester. Rochester, Buffalo, and that whole area had wonderful horn players. And it was a really big scene for a while. So George Lorenz came to rock and roll as the Hound out of the local honky tonks. His theme music was, he would play Bill Doggett's honky tonk behind his rap when he'd be talking. He says, "You kids want to come out? There's going to be a dance next week." He was the most engaging oral listening experience because it was dramatic, it was theatrical, and he had a nickname, the Hound. Lee Moore, the coffee drinking night owl. See, all these, you got to have a hand. Get yourself an alternative reality. At least a name. Thank you all for having me on. Any other questions? I'd be happy to keep the answers short.
Peter, you want to play a song for us?
Well, is it coming over all right?
It does. It's coming over all right.
Let's see. Oh yeah, here's a song I wrote way back. David Grisman and I had a band called Earth Opera, and this is one of the ballads. Can you open up the skies? Can you answer all the lies? Do you ever look upon her face with upturned eyes? Take a stick across the picket fence posts of your mind and wonder of a time when love was blind and you were full of wonder. How long has it been since you've cried and kicked the autumn leaves aside and laughed through your tears at the passing of our years? Let the laughter howl and scream. We're players in an ancient dream of a time when love was blind and you were full of wonder. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
I see everybody's little, Syracuse. Yeah, Deb. Shaky. Well, I mean, this is the real thing. Who'd have thunk? This is it, across space and time.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I have so much to digest now. It's been a very eye-opening, uplifting experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and from me too. I really appreciate that you all have me here. I'm going to be following along and see what's up next and all that too. because I got a lot of free time right now.
I knew I had that with us anytime.
Go ahead.
I knew I had this book, and it was in my bookshelf when you mentioned the Green Man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you talking about that. I opened it up and read a couple of the poems inside, and it's like it's it's a whole nother avenue for songs.
Wait, you're talking about Patrick Cavanaugh.
Correct.
That's Patrick Cavanaugh's biography. Autobiography.
Autobiography, right. Wow.
You know, yeah, oh no. He's a whole Ireland is such a source. You know, he wrote this on Raglan Road on an autumn day. I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger, yet I walked along the enchanted way. And I said, let grief be a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street in November, we tripped lightly along the ledge of the deep ravine where can be seen the true worth of passion's pledge. The Queen of Hearts still making tarts, and I not making hay. Oh, I love too much by such silence is happiness thrown away. And I gave her the gifts of the mind. I gave her the secret sign that's known to the artist who has seen the true gods of sound and stone. And word and tint I did not stint. I gave her poems to say, with her own name there and her long dark hair, like clouds o'er fields of May. On a quiet street where the old ghosts meet, I see her walking now, away from me so hurriedly. My reason must allow that I had wooed, and not as I should, a creature made of clay. When the angel woos, the clay he lose his wings at the dawn of the day. On Raglan Road, on an autumn day, first and new.
Thank you for that.
I mean, to me, that is a perfect song. I've always thought that is the great foundation song of, well, it's an Irish song. It's gonna be good. Yes.
Hey, hey, Peter.
Mm.
Did Bob Dylan still steal that melody too? I think he did for Kennedy I.O.
I don't know.
Yeah, check it out. I think it's a very close to the same melody. It's just but he's a master of that.
What's the song? The Dylan song?
Kennedy I.O.
I never heard it.
It's yeah.
Well, Chimes of Freedom.
Kennedy I.O. It's
really?
it's a tough song, and it's you should hear it. Yeah.
It's about Canada?
No, that's I think that was a name of a destination for a ship and that he was like shanghaied onto a ship and that was him and the captain and it's a bizarre story. I'm going to go back and study it again myself as soon as I can find it. But yeah, I bet you can Google it and get it.
It reminds me of one of my favorite songs is by John Prine. Is it Lake Louise?
Oh yes.
What? So I've tried to learn that. I cannot learn that song. That is really hard song.
Yeah.
You had to live that one.
Right.
And it's full of Native American stuff and the whole border. It's amazing.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing the Irish into this. It was
well, it's not
it's hard to.
When you go to Jamaica, if you speak with an Irish accent, they'll understand every word you're saying.
As opposed to if you go to Ireland.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Wow.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Peter, thank you. My goodness. It was such a blessing. And we've got, this is day 4 now, and we're just keeping full steam ahead. We've got Shaky Graves coming up next, and we're all very excited. Peter, feel free to hang around. But everybody has sure appreciated every kind of bit of input. It's just so special to have you. Thank you.
It's a great hang. Wonderful to see you all.